It's 7 o'clock in Southern California and time for the Thursday night D-Star Roundtable for June 29th, 2017. This is Mike in 6HKH, your net control. Also, the Angels and the Dodgers begin playing right now. That will be a distraction. And if somebody wants to keep track of the score and let me know from time to time, since I obviously can't turn the volume up, but I can have a TV on in the background, I would appreciate it. This roundtable is held every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific at 0200 UTC on XRF-002 Alpha and a constellation of X-reflectors, including XRF-310 Alpha, XRF-555A, and our multi-protocol X-reflector XLX-212A. This is a technical roundtable dedicated to D-Star and Open Digital Systems. It is a group effort. So we expect stations to join us, and to do so, that is to join a discussion, start a topic, or ask a question, just key up when I call for stations. Please remember to not quick key or tailgate. I will pause regularly to let you key up, and I ask that participating stations do the same. We don't take formal check-ins or do a roll call to give us more time to talk D-Star, but if you'd like to key up and let us know how you're doing with your D-Star station or repeater system, feel free to do so. Just wait for time when there's not much going on, which hopefully is not going to be a problem. Net Control is online at roundtable.tech. That's roundtable, all one word, .tech. Just enter that in the address field of your favorite browser, and it will take you to the Roundtable Forum board where you can find a lot of information about this net and its constellation of X-reflectors, as well as, and perhaps more importantly so, our real-time chat feature called the Shoutbox. You can use that to contact me as well as to post information relevant to the topic at hand, such as links and quick notes. We ask that stations offering a web address in conjunction with their presentation to post the URL or DNS in the Shoutbox so that those listening now or later can link to that website or document location. So, join us on our Shoutbox/chat room at roundtable, all one word, .tech. You'll also find there a lot of hopefully interesting posts because we have several folders, general discussions, current discussions, all kinds of things. And you can post stuff, reply to it, check it out. It's easy to join. You can use the Shoutbox and nose around without being But in order to post anything or do a reply or to keep on top, that is to be notified when something's been posted, you have to join us. No big deal. And I recommend that everybody do so because nothing bad happens. You just have to give us your call sign and prove that you're not a robot. Now, at the close of the roundtable tonight, the Shoutbox, which usually is pretty filled up as we progress through this net, will be moved to the Shoutbox history, which is above the general roundtable discussion board. Podcast listeners usually can get the Shoutbox downloaded automatically depending upon the podcast player application that they use. First up on the roundtable tonight is 60 seconds of D-Star Basics. And on 60 seconds of D-Star Basics for tonight, I wanted to talk briefly and maybe get an extended discussion concerning problems that you may be having connecting to a X-reflector, or for that matter, any of the reflectors in our constellation of X-reflectors, which are all persistently linked together. That's a special feature available solely to X-reflectors. And, you know, what happens, our stations get frustrated because they get linking to responded to them either by text or by the voice on the radio instead of linked to. Or they get nothing. In any event, they key up. They don't see themselves on the dashboard. The dashboard is a good place for the X-reflectors to check to see if you're linked or connected because they update very, very quickly, unlike REF and perhaps other lesser reflector modes or protocols. The X-reflector groups they update pretty quickly so you can see what's going on. But if you're not there, the very best thing you can do is to try to connect to another reflector. Now, in the case of the constellation here on the Thursday night D-Star Roundtable, connecting to any one of the other reflectors that are linked is probably the best move, because it could be that one reflector's down. Now, remember, the X reflectors are robust. The software is very stable, and it doesn't have half the difficulties that REF or D plus reflectors have. But with most reflectors, as is the case with all of, in fact, if not most of the X reflectors, certainly those here on the constellation, they're on servers. And servers are subject, as we all know, to going down. Whether you pay for a data center to host your X reflector, or if you have some other kind of arrangement for cloud service, none of them are ever up 24/7. Now, I guess if you're a commercial operation, you could have redundant servers, and that would be the smart thing to do. And some of the service providers, in fact, offer that, but it's at an extra cost. And in this business, I mean, this is not a commercial operation. We have no income coming in to support paying for beyond what we already pay for the X reflectors, which, you know, these are the guys that are on the X reflector, so-called Kings of Digital team. They pay for the reflector servers out of their own pockets, and they don't expect to be, compensated for that. But then going beyond that to having redundant, so that's just a bit much. But any server can go down without notice. Just remember, that doesn't mean, though, the reflector software is bad or the reflector is no good. That just happens, at least in the X reflector arena. Certainly, if you go to one of the other X reflectors, for example, in the constellation, and they're not working, that is a much larger problem. And at that point, and it's not likely you're going to see that. There's just too many reflectors and all going down at one time, is because they're not on the same server. We're quite frankly not idiots, but still, there's no reason why you can't go to another reflector, one that you would connect to regularly, and check that out as well. Then, if you can't connect to the X reflector, let's say in the constellation, and some other reflector of your choice that you know you've connected to in the past, then you can at that point probably conclusively say, well, maybe there's something wrong with my hotspot. Maybe there's a host file issue. And of course, that takes us into a whole nother topic. But rather than jumping up and down and sending out emails and calling people and saying, hey, your reflector isn't working, try first what happens elsewhere. Now, in the event that you find that one of the constellation reflectors or the reflector other than the ones that we supply or provide, it doesn't work, it would be a great thing to let the admin know that you can't connect and you believe it's a reflector. I mean, they may not know that. And it could be down for a brief time or several hours, but it could be an indicator that there's a problem, probably with the server. And administrators and the people that put these reflectors up like to know that. So however you can get a hold of your admin or with the guys that are here, I mean, it's not, you can certainly post something in the shout box, but it's no secret who it is that runs and takes care of, maintains these reflectors. And you can email them, or you can get on one of the other reflectors that does work and start calling for any one of us, myself or W6KD or K6KD, WB5EKU, and say, hey, look, one of the reflectors is down. That would be greatly appreciated. And that's the least you can do. Just don't go away grumbling that you can't connect. But at the same time, don't also just go away and get upset because you think the reflector is no good. You got to do a little bit more than that. And so that's kind of 60 seconds of D-Star Basics. We've talked before about how to resolve problems with your access point, your hotspot, and we're welcome to talk about that more if somebody would like to do that. Now, as for 60 seconds of D-Star Basics, well, it's kind of a running joke. It's never 60 seconds. It's always far, far more. In fact, I can't remember when 60 seconds of D-Star Basics was, in fact, 60 seconds. But if there's something you'd like to add, if there's further comment, if you think there's a different way of going about business, if you disagree, in fact, with any commentary you hear tonight, we encourage you to key up because we like constructive criticism. We like to hear other views, and we'd like to know more about perhaps the topic that was discussed. Absolutely no one here will get upset if you challenge someone on their thinking or perhaps how they, argue that things should be on their view of a particular device or how something operates because we're here to get out the correct information. We don't like speculation or guessing unless you clearly state that you're going to speculate or guess. In any event, we're going to get into topics here pretty quick, but let me see if anyone has any questions, concerns about what we've just discussed or would like to add something to our opening volley of 60 seconds of D-Star Basic Stations. Please key up.
W6KDM.
And we say hello to Bob, W6KD. Thanks for being with us. Go ahead.
Mike and everybody on the net. Yeah, just to put it in perspective, I mean, what Mike's talking about there. I mean, all servers are at some amount of risk, but the Constellation here, the reflectors are actually running in the Amazon cloud, and it has proven to be very reliable. The server that XRF 555 is running on, I just looked, it's been up 779 days consecutively. But one of the Constellation reflectors was taken down for an hour or two due to Amazon maintenance on the server earlier in the week, and so the point is that even good reliable commercial infrastructure does occasionally have some downtime, and so if it happens during the roundtable, I'll just go to one of the other reflectors. John and I, kind of do an overwatch when the roundtable's going on, and if one of them drops out, we're usually on it within seconds, reconfiguring the linkages so that the remaining reflectors are linked together. So if you find that there's silence where there should be a net, try 555, try 310. If you're on one of those, try one of the other ones anyway. But yeah, we're pretty proud actually of the reliability and the track record so far here. The bugs have been pretty much stomped out of the fourth generation X reflector software, and it's working well. But yeah, every now and then even Amazon has problems. So back to the net, W6KD.
All right, Bob, appreciate that. Anyone else have comments about reflector operation and what to do when you can't find one of your favorites or the reflector you choose to connect to? I mean, when you think about it, especially if it's one you haven't been on before and you can't seem to link to it, and you get that linking to notice, the verbal announcement or by text, you ask yourself, okay, well, is it me? Is it the reflector? I mean, what do we do next? That is a stumbling block, especially for those that are fairly new to D-Star and to reflectors. Others with further comment, we'll take you now. Please key up.
K6KD.
And we say hello to John, K6KD. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mike, and also everybody on the net. I just wanted to elaborate on one thing you said. The Amazon cloud is a very high quality cloud. It's actually among the cloud servers. I was just reading. It's got greater capacity than the next 11 combined, and that includes Google's cloud service and Microsoft Azure. A lot of the Fortune 500 companies run on the same infrastructure that our reflectors are running on. The difference is, as Mike alluded to, that for example, Netflix is running on the Amazon cloud, as is, of course, the Amazon store. And what they do, they would have problems. So if they went down, so what they do is they have a lot of redundant servers going. just to with things called mirroring and other techniques, so that if one goes down, the others take over, immediately. And as Mike said, we don't do that just for reasons of cost. I mean, we could, if we had an unending stream of money coming in, we could have 20 XRF 002s around, 20 310s, 20 555s, and but we don't, obviously we don't do that. So the kind of redundancy we provide is going to a different reflector, and so that it just means a little bit of work on the user's part. Anyway, back to net, K6KD.
It is interesting that the Amazon Cloud Service, which has a lot of praise if you just take a survey of cloud servers. I mean, there are a lot of loss leaders that offer, free service this, and, you buy for 6 months, you get another 6 months free and this and that. But Amazon actually has a subscription level, I believe, and I guess I'm going to ask John this. In fact, I am going to ask John this. That actually makes it reasonable for the everyday Joe to use Amazon to run a reflector, for example. I know there are a lot of reflectors that are on Amazon, but there are a lot that are not. And the cost, surprisingly, is relatively low. Of course, this is a non-commercial, use, and we're not asking for their technical staff to be standing around waiting for something bad to happen to fix. And we haven't bought into, the dozen redundant servers to make sure that there's not even a glitch or momentary pause in the server service. But as a data center, I was surprised to learn how reasonable it is generally for what it is they provide, given that you're elbow neighbors with some of the biggest boys in the streaming business. So, John, can you comment on that? K6KD, go ahead. Now, we're not, just a second, we're not supporting Amazon in the sense of drop what you're doing and go sign up. It's just that it's something to think about, especially for those with standard reflectors. Anyway, K6KD, go ahead.
Okay, well, in terms of Amazon, they have a very good deal. They have for a new account, you can have a server. Now, it's a small server, but it's actually big enough to run a reflector. You can have one for a year for free without paying any costs. After that, it depends upon if you were to prepay 3 years in advance for $124, it would come out to about $3.44 a month. Plus a few cents for some storage fees. So very, very reasonable. But there are other services. There are some very bad services that are out there. There are some that have a fairly decent reputation. Another one, there's a few that are $5 a month. And then there's one that I'm just trying out on another for a separate reflector for $250 a month. So there's a lot of options, and it's a very, very cost effective way to run things. Back to Ned.
Thanks, John. Anyone else with comments concerning reflectors, connectivity, problems with them staying up, servers? We'll take it now, please, Kia.
ZL2UDF.
And we welcome ZL2UDF to the round table. Go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Wade Malcolm, and I'm in the lower half of North Island in ZL. Interesting comments. My understanding is that, yes, Amazon is really good in North America. Unfortunately, out in Australia, not so good. They had a storm through Sydney, and I don't know why, but Amazon actually had their two server sites, because of replicating, not too far apart in suburbs. And if you know Sydney, the suburbs are quite close together, only a few kilometres wide, most of them. So I don't know why they did that. While I'm not just really a Microsoft supporter, at least Microsoft in this part of the world have one centre in Melbourne, so geographically I've got some distance from Sydney, so if you know Australia, the map. access in New South Wales, Melbourne, and Victoria, which makes a lot more sense. So I think really what I'm trying to say is that just be aware of what sort of service you want or expect before you. So if you just want a single site type system, probably getting a bit off the reflector subject. So and I agree with what the earlier comments about being on this net. That yes, just have a look. And I think in the main, I can't comment, can't say anything more but praise for the reflectors. Certainly for these the reflectors work really well and great information source, especially with the nets.
All right, Malcolm, appreciate that. Well, it is interesting to learn that Amazon, despite it being, attempting to dominate the world marketplace, that there are actually places in the world that they don't work well. And so you mentioned Microsoft and its cloud server that they publicize a lot. It's very popular. But then again, you have to, as you said, think about what it is you want. If you're running a website, sometimes the website licensing group, and I just lost the phrase. There's a bunch of them. GoDaddy is one, and there's various others. Sometimes the website service, that is the server space for your website that you're buying the name for your website name from that particular provider. I mean, sometimes that's a better deal. Sometimes not. You can get all the website URLs that you like, and sometimes the service that those particular website name. God, I'm having brain fart here right now for how you describe it. But anyway, you guys know what I'm talking about. So, and I'm saying nothing more than what Malcolm already said, so I don't know why I'm doing that. Stations, please key up.
W6KD.
W6KD, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what part of the net we're in here, so I don't necessarily want to belabor the discussion, but it's probably a worthy discussion, actually, to talk about, network topology. The issue that the ZL2UDF brings up is it's not an issue of Amazon servers being any of us capable for anybody. It's the communications infrastructure that's required to reach there. So if for example, with the Constellation, running on the Amazon cloud in the U.S., if getting to that server entails having to use problematic, undersea cable infrastructure, satellite infrastructure perhaps, or whatever, or you just happen to be in a remote location in the Canadian Northern Territory or something with a really spotty internet connection, the comm infrastructure between you and the server is important as well. And so for setting up, and in particular with these extraflectors, because they do have the capacity of being linked together, setting up a linked network that can be whose configuration can be changed, basically, can be very flexible and something advisable. But anyway, that's a discussion we could have anyway that might be worthy talking in more depth about. But yeah, it's not an issue of the servers. The servers run just fine. But if you're in New Zealand and you have to go over some very long transoceanic cables with potentially problematic spotty infrastructure in between you and the server, then that can be a problem. So anyway, back to the net, W6KD.
K.
Well, actually, we can take that up momentarily. There's a few other things we want to get through before we do start out on a major topic. In the meantime, K6KD, I got you. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to make a real quick comment. There were a couple of outages at the Amazon data centers in Australia. One in June of 2016. The company confirmed a software bug, and coupled with a power supply issue. And apparently, there was a brief outage in March of this year. That is not typical of the Amazon infrastructure. And I think they got kind of a bad rap. So it is what it is. Anyway, back to net.
ZL2U.
Alrighty, ZL2UDF, go ahead. All right, I think we may have had a double. Let me see. N1PEV recognized. ZL2UDF. Hopefully you haven't started talking. Let me check. Are you with us? All right, I think he's transmitting. Let's just pause to wait for him to unkey. All right, ZL2UDF N6HK, copy.
Yes, I seem to have dropped out there. I don't know whether you copied what I said, but basically it was a combination of probably with this being so geographically close in Sydney, I probably should have had the site somewhere else outside of Sydney, maybe out in the western reaches. But that and the other one with the power was, I believe, it was a human problem. The maintenance wasn't attended to. Back to you.
No, there was a double. It was inadvertent, and the other station won. Was trying to key up. No big to do, but was that the extent of your transmission? Because unfortunately, we didn't hear any of it. It's not you. It's just the nature of the D-Star Beast. You just can't quick key unless I call for stations. Then, of course, quick keying is appropriate. But ZL2 to UDF, we got that. Anything further? Go ahead.
I gather you copy that, and thanks for coming back to us. I've probably keyed up, my fault there. I'll take responsibility for that. Probably keyed up too quickly. Anyway, thanks, like I say, for being there.
All right, appreciate you being with us. N1PEB, thanks for joining us. Go ahead. All right, I have N1PEB keyed up. If it was inadvertent or accidental, which happens, we all do that. It's no big to do. Just let me know so I can take you off the list. But I hate to skip by a station that wants to be part of the roundtable. So N1PE. Let me just make sure I got the PEB. Welcome. If you have something for us, please go ahead. All right, nothing heard. Anything further before we move forward, and then we'll take up some topics? Please key up. KG5ONB. Welcome, and go ahead. This. All right, all I got was a couple of key ups, no audio. I'm not sure what. Let me just. Yeah, that's all I got was 2 key ups, no audio. So KG5ONB. Try it again. Go ahead. Oh, I hope we're not having problems tonight. I understand some stations show up on the screen because I see everything because they have to link, and sometimes in doing so, the Kiev goes all the way through the network, and we understand that just as with stations that sometimes try to unlink and need to have a clear channel to do that. But I hope that we're not going to have difficulties because I have two stations now that keyed up on the screen and weren't able to get them. So if there's a difficulty or you think you were talking and I didn't hear you, key up again. We'll recognize you and get you in here as we progress. No problem. All right. There aren't any shouts in the shout box that began today, although there are a few now, mostly related to the Angels-Dodgers game, which I'm closely monitoring just because I have to. And there were some shouts, though, from last week, as well as we had quite a few discussions, and we'd like to take a pause early on in the roundtable to give stations to provide updates to topics they heard last week. Sometimes podcast listeners or those that downloaded from either Broadcastify or perhaps they recorded directly on their radios, and they want to contribute, and they couldn't, obviously, because they weren't around and were listening to a recording. We can take you now to pick up things that you would have liked to have said had you been around for a previous discussion. And if you have any follow-up or corrections to things that we discussed last Thursday, let's take you now. Stations, please key up. All right, nothing seen or heard. So, there's an announcement that I'd like to make, and I've been asked to make it. And next Thursday, the stations that are responsible for this particular announcement will be with us, but they couldn't tonight. And I said, I understand. You know, sometimes the holiday weekend extends many days earlier than the holiday and many days after. But for whatever reason, it's, people are getting ready to barbecue. In fact, I think we have somebody that came on early on in the net saying, hey, I'm going to barbecue and I'm not going to be on the round table until I'm done eating. I got that. But in any event, we're going to have a couple new nets coming to the constellation of X reflectors, and it's going to be coming from REF 026 Bravo. There are two nets there. They're headed by VE6DV Jeff. You probably have heard him on the constellation on and off during the past 2 weeks. But beginning July 1st, that group, and there's two different segments to this group, they have a D-Star net, and that now airs on REF026B, but it's moving to the constellation. So their new home is going to be XRF002 Alpha, and, of course, the rest of the reflectors that are linked. So on Tuesday evenings at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, there will be a new D-Star net. It's called 100 watts and a wire, but it's a D-Star net. And they also are going to be moving their Saturday evening net, which airs at 6 p.m. Mountain as well. That is supported by a D-Star users Facebook group. So this 100 watts and a wire.com group, which has a D-Star net, and then a Facebook.com D-Star users group, which also has a net, have decided to move to a new home. We're glad to say that it's going to be us, and you'll have a new host. I presume it's going to be VE6DV. So on Tuesday evenings at 6 p.m. Mountain and Saturday evenings at 6 p.m. Mountain, there will be two new D-Star nets, and we're tickled to death to have them join us. Keep in mind that they are jumping much as this net did from D+ and going over to the X reflectors, which means that those that were perhaps joining him entirely by radio, by repeater, are going to have to get hotspots, or if they connected by D+ and were using other than acceptable software, and they have to, they would now have to add, well, you guys know what's going on because you're all here. But it's not an easy task. They've been working on it for some time. And VE6DV, Jeff, just alerted me. Well, that was interesting. Apparently, we had a station talking, and I'm not, while I was transmitting, let me check. W6KD and 6HKH, what did you hear the last 2 minutes?
I got you on two of the Constellation reflectors, Mike. When you unkeyed or timed out, whichever happened there, the other station was there, but you were audible the entire 3 minutes you were talking there.
Yeah, no, I thank you, Bob. I ain't keyed on purpose as the 3 minutes was coming up, and I heard the other station. So KG50NB recognized. I'll call on you in just a moment. So we're going to post this on the Thursday Night D-Star Roundtable Forum board, so you can have the dates and times. We're also going to include it in our flyer that will go out next week, as well as a newsletter we're working on it. Pretty interesting this far, and I hope that you'll be able to support the additional nets that are coming to this constellation by, if you can, checking in on Tuesday evening, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and on 6 p.m. Mountain Time again on Saturday night. There are also some other groups that are on D+, that are sick and tired of D+, I'm quoting one of them, that are going to be looking to joining us and using the constellation. And so we look forward to adding nets that hope to increase participation and audience by joining us here on the constellation of X reflectors, or as we like to be known collectively as the Kings of Digital. So Jeff EE6DV will be with us next Thursday to provide some additional insight. Look forward to the information being posted on the Roundtable Forum board. So, with that, let's do this. KG50NB. When you unkeyed, when I unkeyed, I heard you talking, so we may have been doubling. I don't know. I won the round, which is the way it should be, but now it's your turn. KG50NB. Go ahead.
KG50NB. Oh, we're using a new dongle, and I don't know what happened. I'm so sorry. It was accidentally something, and then we realized. Sorry.
Not a problem. Look, that sort of thing happens. Accidental key-ups happen. We just don't we try to avoid doubles, and I just wanted to make sure that you were not trying to get into the roundtable, but welcome to the Thursday Night D-Star Roundtable, and if you have a question about the dongle, especially if you're new to D-Star or to DV dongles, we'll have a question and answer session later on in the roundtable, and you're welcome to join us then. All right, any other announcements for the Thursday Night D-Star Roundtable? Please key up.
ZL2RO.
And we say hello to Phil, ZR2RO. Go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. In net control. Just something to do with the 4100. I just found, I wouldn't say it was an issue, it was a learning curve. If you're using the 4100 for a hotspot, not a repeater, you get some of your data clipped off, so you don't get a lot of the call signs or the data information coming through. And a little bit of trial and error playing around with the DV Mega and the deviation on it and all that sort of stuff. It was something quite simple in the radio. It had default setting in this radio was fast data, and I'm not sending pictures, pictures or low res pictures or anything like that. I've never done anything like that with D-Star. And the moment I put it to standard data, everything works 100%. The only reason I'm saying this is because the 5100 and the 51 radios all work perfectly fine on a homebrew hotspot. But the 4100, being a newer spec radio, it's like ICOM have tweaked the specs on it to tighten it up a little bit, possibly. But I don't know, that might be useful for anybody else that may have had that sort of issue, that connect control.
All right, well, I appreciate that. So just so we understand it, so the 4100, in the instance where you're transmitting to a hotspot, and the hotspot is either, not responding or responding oddly, you can clarify that. The fix is to, as I take it, to select standard data, which is confusing to me. Maybe you can explain that just a bit further for those that are either have a 4100 and are getting about ready to put a sledgehammer to it, or who are considering buying one. ZL2RO, go ahead.
Understood. In your DV set in the 4100 in the menu in the DV set, there's an option for fast data transmission, and with that selected, if you're running a personal hotspot, which I have found the issue with a personal high-powered hotspot, which I run a GMSK DV Mega hotspot, you don't get, like quick keys would just be a beep and no call sign. Or in your radio it registers call signs. If you've got that enabled, none of that information would be being collected or being coming back from the hotspot, regardless of where it's connected. And it was just a simple thing of taking it off fast data and changing it to standard data in the DV set menu. In the DV set menu in the radios, there's an option for fast data enabled or disabled. I hope if that clarifies it. Over.
Oh, I understand now. I just didn't get. Okay, so all right. Well, appreciate that, and I got it. And anyone have any questions or comments about ZL2RO 6 for the 4100, or need any further clarification? Please key up. Do so now. Alrighty, appreciate it. So, at this point, I'd like to, unless somebody has an objection, return to the topic that W6KD suggested concerning network topology and the communications infrastructure, considerations for which have to be made when selecting a cloud service or a data center. And it's a topic that it's been actually probably a couple of years since we discussed it. And given the number of reflectors that are stood up seemingly daily, at least in the DXtra arena, and with a lot of excitement coming on with new capabilities in both hardware and software for the DXtra and more particularly the XLX reflectors, I think we're going to see a surge in the number of reflectors that are going to be stood up. And so the server to choose, as well as the considerations in deciding where and how to stand up, so to speak, X reflectors, of which the network topology and communications infrastructure are an important consideration. I think we should call on W6KD to take this further. What do you guys think? Well, why am I asking you? W6KD, if you're ready, go ahead.
Okay, Mike. Well, yeah, when we talk about topology, that term may be new to some folks. That's essentially it's the layout of nodes on a network. The wiring diagram, if you will, how you connect all the parts and pieces together. If you were to lay it out and map it out, then for the constellation here, we've got 3 X reflectors that run together in a single data center on the Amazon cloud. And, there are different considerations. Redundancy, scalability, the ability to upscale your operation if you have a sudden increase in load, and of course what's the word I'm looking for here? I'm not coming up with the word for it. The ability to the ability to operate, continuation of operations if something catastrophic were to happen in the data center. The way we have it organized in the constellation is, if somebody dropped a bomb on the Amazon data center where the 3 reflectors run, well, they wouldn't be running. Although we do have the ability to stand up backups in any number of places on a number of different services, in fact, but the reason that we have them clustered together like that is mostly for scalability, because they sit next to each other and they have very, very quick, very, very short latency connections, on the order of 1 or 2 milliseconds. In fact, sometimes sub-millisecond latency between the reflectors. So in effect, they are one big reflector, and so you can take parts and pieces of it down and have it still working. And if 250 people decided to show up, you could spread the users out amongst the 3 reflectors and have very, very little, in fact, no real measurable effect in latency and because of the loading. Let me change hands. As an example, the REF-30 and REF-1, 2 of the popular places in D+ land, they oftentimes have several hundred users just connected, with not a lot of talking going on, but a lot of people just sort of by default link to those places, and as a result, particularly of late, they've been having a lot of problems with broken connections and spotty. It becomes a problem when you link hundreds of stations to the one node, and then introduce some of the vagaries of the internet, et cetera, and depending on what kind of server you're running on, et cetera, it can become problematic. But there's other considerations as well. If you want to be able to cover a wide area of the world, having a server in one continent and another on another continent, it might be convenient to link them together for a net or something, and then break that link and have them operate independently the rest of the time. There's lots of different considerations, and the neat thing about the X reflectors is that you can link them together in ways that will take advantage, that will leverage the ability to either distribute over a wide area or to scale up with short latency connections between them. Or, for example, you could have a state, like the state of California. You could divide it up into southern, central, and northern California, and have a separate reflector for each of those regions, and then during a net, link them all together so you have one big California net that runs on the 3 reflectors together, and then after the net you separate them, and now you're back to your regional operations. There's all sorts of things you can do with it. Interestingly, though, there's not a lot of use made of this linking capability to date, but it's there, and a potentially powerful tool. Anyway, back to the net, W6KD.
All right, Bob, thank you. Stations who wish to add to this discussion, have further comments or even questions, please key up. Well, nothing seen or heard. As Bob mentioned earlier, you never really know unless you have a trace going on your packets exactly how far you have to travel, and sometimes the route is rather circuitous and unusual in the sense that you could go from the U.S. and for some reason be bounced over to Europe and then back to New York and then finally to the destination, and you might not otherwise know it. And look at all the difficulties that are possible that could either strip packets, cause interruptions, or, of course, as we expect, it works most of the time just perfectly, but it's something that you have to think about when you are talking on D-Star, and, well, for that matter, any digital mode that utilizes the internet. It's just, you can't think of it as, well, I'm here in Southern California, so I'm going to a server that is in Canada, so it's got to be a straight shot, and that isn't always necessarily so. And, well, I have a question for W6KD. So, does it matter where your server is located? So when you, let's say, choose Amazon as the server for, let's say, a X reflector, do they tell you where it's located? Does it matter where the data center is? And that is, where the service is being provided? And do you have a choice of how it gets there? W6KD, go ahead.
Well, it depends on the service you choose. In the case of Amazon, Amazon has data centers around the world, and yeah, you do have say as to where it is. And truly, though, with half duplex communications such as D-Star, unless you have some really ugly latency, like the kind of latency you find with a satellite connection, for example, location isn't tremendously important. I live in Colorado. The servers are in Oregon, and there's another reflector that I frequent from time to time whose servers in the Denver area, and there's no discernible difference operating on the Constellation or operating on XRF 720 in Denver. So. Is there a measurable difference if you sit down and measure the latency? Yeah, you might find a tenth of a second or something difference, or maybe 150 milliseconds difference. But functionally speaking, with half duplex, where you're not, where one talks at a time, all it does is it results in a very, very slightly longer lag at the end of the transmission. So. Half duplex communications are actually well suited to that kind of thing. Of course, you introduce latency every time your packets are forwarded, whether that be through the internet, just regular internet routing, or whether that be because you're going through a linked system reflectors. It adds a little bit to the latency, but functionally speaking, John and I have done a fair amount of experimentation with really long links, long chains of reflectors located in different places, some in Canada, some on the West Coast, and some locally, and chaining together, even where it's bouncing back and forth across the country, it's almost undetectable. You have to really work at it to make it to where you really see much of a difference. So where the reflector is, not really important, although, as we talked about earlier, if you're a ZL, you probably don't want your reflector to be in, Iceland somewhere. You want it to be, reasonably close. But physical location, physical proximity isn't necessarily important.
K6KD.
Well, I appreciate you answering my questions. That helped me out. K6KD, go ahead.
Okay, well, Mike, there's an interesting thing that will be coming up in a few weeks with a new version of the XLX reflector. I'm not going to talk about DMR and transcoding, except to just discuss how that impacts the network configuration. The next XLX reflectors that will handle both D-Star and DMR will also provide for the capability of transcoding. Now, the transcoding could be done on the same machine, but doesn't have to be. But the server that hosts the transcoding software will require hands-on access, because there are some hardware chips that actually do the guts of the transcoding, and so that you can't just rely on a cloud environment for that because you don't have access to the cloud servers to connect up the hardware device. So what we'll be doing, with an X reflector that's in the Amazon cloud in Oregon, we'll use a server that works closely with the X reflector in California, where we have access to to the actual hardware. And so what happens is a communication is received by the XLX reflector, and if it needs to be transcoded, it'll be sent to the transcoding server and then sent back to the XLX reflector. And I've experimented, although we don't have that software yet, I've experimented with a couple of X reflectors in the Oregon data center, and I temporarily put an X reflector at the server in California, and listen to it, going on a round trip from the Oregon data center to the California data center, and then back to a gateway. And you virtually can't hear any difference, any lag at all. It's really that quick. Back to Ned.
That's interesting. All right, thanks, John. All right, stations. Follow-up, comments, questions, concerns? I'm taking now. Please key up. All righty, nothing seen or heard. So, there's so many considerations that you have to think about, and things that, this stuff oftentimes just works. It's kind of plug and play, although, shame on me for calling that. That's something that I think is amateur radio stations and operators that we're not supposed to have it so easy, but that's beside the point. The easier, the better. All right, there is a station that posted VE7LEEs, been hanging in with the roundtable since day one, having problems connecting to XRF002A. Can't tell much from what he has posted. Let me just see if he is with us, and I'm going to call see if anyone else is having any difficulties. I haven't any reports about that, but VE7LEE, are you able to join us? Go ahead.
W6KB.
All right, no response. It could be that his, I'm not sure if VA7REF is a repeater or a reflector, but assuming it's a reflector, you never know. W6KD, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if this applies to Ted or not, but I've run into a couple of folks over the last few weeks that have had trouble getting into XRF2, but not into XRF 310 or 555. And it appears if you're using a DV4 Mini that the host file data is incorrect. It's I don't know if it's an old host file or if it's the current host file with old data in it or what, but anyway, the last guy I talked to with that problem had definitely he had a bad URL in his host file, and I can't tell you exactly how he fixed it, but he did. It was a VE6AER, I think it was. Tony, I talked to him on XRF, on the Constellation. He was on, I think 555 or something. He had been unable to get into 002, and it turned out that the host file data being used by his DV4 Mini was just wrong. So if Ted's using a DV4 Mini, that might explain it. And I'm not sure where their host file data comes from, but that's if you find that you're able to get into everything else but not XRF2, that's probably the first thing to look at is your host file data.
WE5.
All right, Bob, appreciate it. And as I recall, when we had a discussion about host files, in particular the DV4 Mini, there were some stations that implied that now, under the latest software, actually firmware update, that the fine folks at the DV4 Mini production crew, and I can't remember the name of the group that produces them, had provided the user the option to update independent of their server host files, but then that calls into question what happens when they then turn the device back on, and if it's automatically updated, is the correct host file information again being fed to that particular device? Let's find out. WB5EKU, maybe we'll learn more. Don, thanks for joining us. Go ahead.
WB5EKU.
WB5EKU and 6HKH, I got the initial key up and 2 subsequent key ups, no audio. Go ahead.
Okay, N6HKH, WB5EKU.
I got you now with the radio in the background, but at least we got you. Go ahead.
Okay, that was weird. I'm gonna try 2 hotspots to turn this guy down here in the background. Okay. For the DV4 Mini, the host file is called xref.ip. I'll put this information on the shot box also. On my computer, Windows 10, it's under local disk C, program files x86, a DV4 Mini. I'm looking at mine right now, and it does appear that XRF2, it does have the incorrect IP address on it. So I think the easiest way to rectify that is you can go into an edit mode and put the proper address or the URL in there and save it, and it should work. But that is in local disk, program file x86, DV4 Mini, and the name of the file is xref.ip.
Excellent news. All right, yeah, if you could put that in the shout box, we'd greatly appreciate it. But Don, what happens though? Does the DV4 Mini crowd, I think it's Wireless Holdings, how do they update the host file each time you turn it on, downloading what they think are the correct host files? How do you avoid it being overwritten? WB5EKU, go ahead.
Looking at the date of the file, I don't believe that they update it every time it starts up. I think it updates it when you actually update their software. So I guess we have to send another message to them to say, hey, please check this so on your updates it's correct. But I'm pretty sure it's not. I'll double check that. I'll correct it in mine. I'll shut it down and boot it back up and see if that was a problem. But yeah, I think we should inform them that the incorrect IP address is in their host file.
Well, I would think so. I mean, that calls into question those stations that regularly update the software and then experience difficulty connecting to reflectors or a reflector. And, certainly, as we've discussed, checking the correctness of the host file should be one of the first moves, assuming that all else seems to be the same. And again, assuming that, the DV4 Mini has worked fine for you otherwise. But that is disturbing that they don't have the correct information. I know that we did have a discussion quite some time ago about where these devices that push the host files to your multi-mode device like the DV4 Mini and the and others similar. You know, how often do they update it? Where do they get the information? Some of them, and I'm not certain which one because it's been a while since we had this discussion. One of the manufacturers, maybe it was the Shark Group, were switching around, flitting around, looking for an appropriate host file server, and another one just had their own independent list of host files, and Lord knows where they got that from and how often it's updated. And you know, it becomes disturbing, especially if the user's not informed up front that that's how it works, and they provide the ability to VNC or otherwise log into the device and then update and lock out that correct and updated host file information, thus not having to worry anymore about each time you download software firmware or each time the device manufacturer pushes, if it does, independent of a call for it, the host files, so that you have it correct, because these things change, especially when you as we discussed, I think last week, when you rely upon IPs and IPs alone, those actually change quite a bit. On the other hand, having actually named servers, so-called DNS, those don't change quite so often, and that is, of course, the preferred host file name. But then, you know, we preach, and we can only hope that people listen. Stations, please keep up. Well, I mean, DV4 Mini users, is this your understanding? Who else has run into this? I'm assuming that WB5 EKU's information on how to resolve it is accurate, but is it updated when you call for a software update or you download a firmware update, or is there some other means of preventing the wrong host file, one that you corrected, in the software of the device, from being overwritten? It'd be interesting. I mean, people have got to encountered this, I would think, given the number of devices that are out there. Anyone experienced this and wish to contribute? We'd sure like to hear from you. Please key up. All right, nothing seen or heard, so I'm, I guess as long as you're connecting to us and it works, I mean, the answer is, of course, if, as Bob suggested, just jump on one of the other reflectors that, has, well, just jump on any one of the other Constellation X reflectors and you're good to go. I mean, you don't have to connect to 002, although I would describe that as the primary and main one, or the leading reflector, but it's very cool that we have a low number, 002. There's only one better than that. I'm not so sure I'd want to have that number, just because of some issues involving that number elsewhere on other reflector protocols. But still, there's no shame in jumping to one of the others. It's all the same, which is one of the cool things, of course, about the constellation of X reflectors, is I pat myself and everybody else on the back. All right. Anything further on this subject, or anything else related to our topics thus far? Let's take you now before we move on. Please key up. All right. Nothing seen or heard, and we'll look forward to getting Don's post for those that are just got a DV4 Mini and struggling to make it work, although there shouldn't be a struggle. I mean, it is, when you talk about multi-mode access devices, multi-mode hotspots, you've got a lot to concern yourself with. It all has to work, and, nothing in the digital realm just connects directly. You've got to worry about things such as host files. Hotspots is what I meant to say. All right. Now, I really am concerned about Buster. Buster is the Mac OS app that's available through the Apple App Store, and it's a way that Mac OS piece of software is programmed, but it allows you to connect on D-Star. There's been 2 upgrades from version 1.0. It went to 1.1 and then 1.2. And I know there are Buster users out there, and surprisingly, when I called to see if anyone's installed 1.2 and are using it, or if there's problems with it, we just wanted to see if it is what it is. I mean, the only issue is that it's using the auto update list from ar-dns.net, which frankly is very accurate, but it's IP addresses only, and there's been some difficulty with connecting to some reflectors as the IP addresses have changed to where they promote a name server for the host file. So Buster users, either we'll take 1.1 or 1.2 if you haven't upgraded. Tell me how it works, and if you've had any problems, let's promote this particular app. It's pretty cool. Puts Mac devices without, and the ThumbDB. Obviously, there's got to be some, device to externally to connect and to, do the, it has an EMBE chip in it, but then for Buster, that is the ThumbDB from Northwest Digital that works like a champ. Stations, please key up. Well, I don't know what it is. It's like the Mac users are hiding, or they go somewhere else. If that's the case, I'd sure like to know where they're hanging out, or if they've just given up on it. It'd be fun to know. Then again, it's made for the ThumbDB. But it might. I don't know if it would work on any other Access device. I'm just not sure. I haven't tried it with anything else. It's worked fine here. It's not really usable for a net. I have run into some incorrect IP addresses where I just am not allowed to connect. But it seems to be working well. It's not working fully. There's apparently some bugs. But one thing that I haven't been able to do is to follow this particular procedure, which is not authorized, so to speak, by the developer of Buster, but it's been posted all over the place, of a tricky but successfully done modification of one particular file within the Mac program's package content that you can use to update host files to get the correct ones in there. And I haven't done that yet. I thought it'd be interesting to find out if someone else has done it and whether it makes a difference if you use an IP or a named host file. So it's just unknown if the program is written for IP addresses only, which would be odd. But I guess anything's possible, especially involving Apple and Apple products. But oh well, we'll keep plugging away at this and see what happens. So let me just take one more pause and just check to make sure that Buster users weren't distracted by the Dodgers-Angels game that is presently ongoing. And at the bottom of the 4th, I'm sad to report that it was, oh no, you know what? The Angels just scored. It's now tied up at the bottom of the 4th. I already feel better. I was getting stressed out because it was 1-0 Dodgers, and that's unacceptable. All right, stations, please key up. Well, nothing there, so we'll just move right along. One of the suggested topics, which I thought was entirely interesting, is those stations that travel. When you end up at a destination, for example, KE08YJ just takes these long trips and stays for months at a time on remote islands. And, fortunately, he's not incommunicado. He takes his equipment with him and can talk, but and we've had discussions about the best way to travel with D-Star and other open digital sources, systems. although primarily it's been about D-Star and how easy it is to travel. But there's another approach, especially if you're going to be, taking more like a sabbatical than a vacation. That is, you're spending a month in a hotel room or at a vacation house at some friend's location. You've got the opportunity to be someplace and you're just not going to move for a month. What about being able to connect back to your gear at your house or on a mountaintop? That is the remote control of your rigs at your shack, and doing so from your vacation destination, and what that would entail. I thought that would be an interesting topic. Would anyone with experience in this, to help us get it started? Because I know there are a lot of stations that, in fact, they've connected and participated in this net remotely, coming in from their home QTH or from wherever they might have gear installed, sometimes on mountaintops. It's pretty easy to put up a Raspberry Pi and other mini computer boards, single computer boards, and turn it into a repeater or access device or as part of the gateway setup, and connect it there and talk as if you're home, but you're not. How do you go about doing that? Stations, please key up.
KE0AYJ.
And we welcome Andy. Hey, I understand you're back from wherever you weren't back from. KE0AYJ. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mike, John, Bob, and the crew out there. Yeah, I'm back. Fabulous 30 days on Kauai. Took care of a few things over there. Good way to travel is with, of course, the DV Mega as far as I'm concerned, but I also have the DV dongle just in case something gives out on me and I'm sort of stuck with just a laptop going there, things like that. And then, of course, with that, you got to have the Wi-Fi connection. Some areas of the islands are pretty sparse on coverage on some of the Wi-Fi spots and even cell phone coverage itself. They're trying to do their best. But UNHF from Hawaii, I was remote using Remote Shack, and I was using Remote Desktop also, running HRD at the base back in Indiana. So many ways you can do it. VNC seems to be the best and still works for me. And I copy that there, John. But I used a lot and it worked quite well. The internet connection being the caveat, it's got to be soft and it's got to be quick, and you got to have that throughput on it. So before I get going on that, let me take a break here. And before I get going on that, I always reboot everything, starting at the router all the way back into the shack, no matter where I'm at. And if I don't have access to the router, well, I make sure that all my cache is cleared out and everything, starting with a clean, fresh boot on the laptop or everything else. And then I do a reboot on the Pi if I'm using that. So get everything updated and run clean. And it works great. It works great. So Remote Shack is the best one that I've found so far.
All right, Andy. Yeah, I appreciate that report. And as I recall, you at one point said that you, in fact, you posted in the shout box, and I appreciate that you used HF Remote Shack. Now, is Remote Shack the brand name of the devices? And if so, what's involved as far as installing it? I don't mean that you should run down the owner's manual, but what do you need at the home QTH, and what do you need at the Remote Shack? And if it's not called quote unquote Remote Shack, what software hardware package did you use? KE0AYJ, go ahead.
Well, I've got a 7100, and I did not use Remote Check in Hawaii. I used RDP, or Remote Desktop, and I've also used VNC from there with my system running open for me at this end with a password. Got into it that way and controlled everything and had complete pass-through of audio and everything like that. Remote Shack, I just got home and it had been delivered while I was over in Kauai. I can take my 7100 control head with me and one end of the Remote Shack devices. There's two of them, and there's a special adapter you need for the 7100. So I got that too. But yeah, you basically plug it into the network, a Remote Shack, and plug your control head into the top of that, and take care of things likewise on the base end or back at your QTH, and mark down a couple of notes on what you're doing, and take the manual with you, because if you don't, you're gonna have nightmares, problems trying to poke around and figure out what you've done wrong. But anyway, do that, and it connects just fine. Audio was really good. Now, I've only tried it for about 40 miles from the shack, and it works absolutely perfectly. So it's Remote Shack, and it works. It just works and works. I don't know what more I can tell you there, Mike.
No more needs said. Let's hear from other stations that have used other remote rig devices, and what do you think? Is it better to take a radio and a access point and some equipment to connect to the internet at your destination, or is the remote rig the way to go? Stations, please key up.
VL2UBF W6KB.
I have ZL2UDF and W6KD first to ZL2UDF. Go ahead.
I don't think the ICOM 7300 has actually D-Star on it. I'm not too sure, but anyway, the listeners might be interested in having a look at a program which you already might be aware of from the UK called TX Factor. And in TX Factor 15, which is not the latest, latest, about 18 minutes in, it shows you Bob there, who's one of the main presenters, operating from some remote location with a beer in hand, and he's just using his laptop. It looks actually, could be an Apple Air port or whatever the Apple product is, or it could be just normal Microsoft type laptop. But yes, he worked in, he can turn his rig off and on and things like that. So it was quite an interesting video. So I don't know whether that might help people see what's available. But thanks for the other previous person, Remote Shack. No, I'll certainly look into Remote Shack. That sounds well worth investigating.
Malcolm, give us the name of the program again, and is it something that we can find online? Back to you.
If you search for TX Factor, TXFACTOR 15, it's release 15. I'm just keying it into the my search will find it, because I've looked at it recently, but it has about the try to find it now. No, I'm not typing it in properly. I'll leave that and go back to you. But it's TX Factor. It's a UK program. There's a whole lot of TX Factors. I think there's 16 of them out there now. Quite interesting presenters, and looking for all aspects, including digital. There's one there on D-Star, by the way, an earlier one. I can't remember the number, but it was quite an interesting one. We have some young people using D-Star down in the south of England. Back to you.
Alrighty, thanks for that. And I got to clarify, TX Factor. Just Google search it. All right, Malcolm, appreciate it. Next to W6KD. Go ahead.
Like I haven't run remote from outside the house, but I do use a device called a remote rig. It sounds like the Remote Shack is a similar type setup. The remote rig's been around for a few years, And yeah, it's a couple of boxes. With the 7100 the ICOM 7100 is one of the better radios to use with it, and of course it's D-Star capable. And you connect one box to the receiver transmitter unit, and the other box connects to the control head, and then you can connect the two via IP, and that IP link can be just a regular Ethernet cable to your router. And in fact, they make a Wi-Fi adapter a little Wi-Fi board that goes into it, and you can connect via Wi-Fi. And the way I use it is actually in the house. I mean, many of us have struggled. If you're like I was in the Air Force for 27 years and moved on average more than once every 2 years over those 27 years, and of course, getting set up and finding a place where you have a good ground and good access to some sort of an exit point for the feed line to go out in the house. Where I am right now in my basement would entail running coax cable for over 100 feet. To get out to anywhere where I could put an HF antenna. So what I do is I use the remote rig to actually allow me to put the control head on my operating desk here in the shack, and without having to run cables, the RT unit is sitting on the other side of the house, right at a point where there's a good ground available and where there's easy access to an entry point for the coax cable, and so I don't have to run cables across the house. I don't have to situate my desk in a place where it's inconvenient, etc. So, and I've also used it in a motorhome the same way. Control head can move anywhere inside the motorhome. All I got to have is a 12-volt power supply, which can be as simple as an alarm battery, and it talks via Wi-Fi to the other half of the radio, which is sitting out in an exterior compartment. 6 feet away from the feed, 6 feet away from the base of the mast, so you don't have to work them over 1,000 miles. Sometimes working at 500 feet anyway, sometimes working at, a couple hundred feet across the house is worthwhile as well, because either you have, structured wiring, or you have you have already established internet infrastructure in the house, and making it ride those wires so that you don't have to be stringing coax, through the wife's dining room or whatever, sometimes is really handy. So, yeah, they're kind of neat. The remote rigs actually have a configurable, it uses, I'm going to forget. It uses the same technology as VoIP, the same voice vocoders as VoIP, for services like Vonage and UMA and the likes. And you can change the bit rate if you want. You can change the quality of that from very high quality with a very high bit rate, which would be no problem on a in the house LAN, or if you're operating over cellular or something where you're paying for your data or you don't have very fast data, you can scale it down with some degradation in audio quality. So yeah, they're very flexible, and it's not just for operating, from your beachfront vacation location. Sometimes operating just across the house is worthwhile as well. Anyway, back to the net, W6Katie.
Indeed. Bob, thanks for that. Stations, please key up.
W8VI.
W8VI, welcome. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. This is Gary, W8VI, located near Cincinnati, Ohio. And you were talking about remote configurations, and one of the ones that I stumbled across through an article I saw on QST a few months ago was remotehams.com. Remotehams.com. Let me break and bring it back up. Remote hams is pretty interesting. For example, I've got a TS480, although you can use a 71 a 7100 and a variety of rigs. And basically, you set your rig up at your home QTH or wherever that might be, your remote station, as a server. And you can use an Android app or a Windows app to control the rig. And recently, I made a trip from Cincinnati to Houston, and along the way, I was able to control the rotor and make quite a few contacts on 40 and 20 meters. If I had a 7100, I feel pretty confident that I could have operated D-Star with that. So that's another one to look at, remotehams.com. They also have a feature where you can privatize or take your station and make it private, or you can put it out on a network. And right now there's 178 other stations out there that are willing to share their station. Now you have to, be able to jump through some hoops. Wait one. One of the hoops is you have to make a copy of your license and send it in so everybody can look at it. And you have to be able to ask permission to operate on some of these stations. But they're all over the world. Again, there's 178 of them that, if you're if you don't have a station and you want to use somebody else's or a friend's, you're able to do that. So that's one that I've ran across, and surprisingly, it works real well. Like I said, my trip back and forth to Houston was over the AT&T network and was able to make contacts whenever I wanted to. When I was down in Houston, I used my laptop and connected through the Wi-Fi, and again was able to turn the rotator and make quite a few contacts. So that's another one. And back to Ned from W8VI.
Well, thanks, Gary. How interesting is that? So, let's say you wanted to connect to a station offering D-Star out of these 150 or so stations that have volunteered their station for use by others, which is pretty cool when you think about it. How would you, do they list the equipment? How would you select a D-Star station or some digital station that has a multimode digital access device that's available for use? W8VI, go ahead.
Sure. When all you have to do is basically download the client. It's called RC4, FORB client, by remotehams, plural.com. And, it's free. Everything's free. You can, they ask for donations, and I've given them a few dollars here and there, because it works so darn well. And, but for example, it'll show you a list of the 178 stations that are on right now. One of them is WD6R, and he has an IC7100, 2 meters only. It shows the location of the station, QTH, what type of rig they're using, and there's a whole host of radios. I don't see any D-Star right now, although in the past I have seen some D-Star stations on here. So it's something, if I had a 7100, I would definitely try it out with D-Star.
Very cool. Appreciate it. Stations, we'd like to hear your stories about operating remotely via, for example, remote rig, remote shack, or remote hams, but maybe some other either hardware, software solution you can buy at a store, or perhaps something that is online where you connect the computer to the with software to the device at home and then run off with your cell phone and who knows what to be able to work the world, but more importantly, working the world on D-Star stations. Please key up.
W6KD.
W6KD, go ahead.
Okay, well, now that we've gone down this rabbit hole, it's probably a good time for somebody to play devil's advocate here, because the thing about D-Star is that the vocoder is efficient enough that it's actually It's actually kind of a, if you will, a kludgy brute force solution to use a remote rig to work D-Star. I mean, it's kind of cool to be able to do it, I guess. It's kind of, it's one of those sort of, robo station kind of things that's kind of cool to be able to say you did it. But on the other hand, it's far more efficient to just take a dongle with you or a hotspot and work it directly from where you're at, because the stream you're going to have to have operating between your station, your remote station, and your control is going to use a lot more bandwidth than just running the D-Star itself. 4.8 kilobauds is nothing. The remote rig uses far more than that because it's encoding audio and sending essentially encoded analog audio, VoIP style, plus all of the control data for the radio, etc. So in terms of efficiency and control, it's really far more efficient, and you get better control if you just take your blue dongle or your thumb DV or whatever, or your portable hotspot, and connect that up, because it actually requires less in terms of internet infrastructure. If you're in a hotel room or whatever, you're more likely to get it to work with your hotspot than you are with a remote rig anyway. So now if you want to work HF on that station, or analog FM or something like that, then that's a whole different story. But for D-Star, working it right from where you're at is probably the best solution still. And then the second topic I was going to bring up, let me change hands. And probably one of more general interest to hams as well, but the remote control of the ability to power up and power down devices, and in particular your radios and station equipment, is really important. And this also relates to folks that are running mountaintop repeaters and the likes. The ability to be able to power cycle your equipment by sending a command via the internet it's not only important, in some cases it's really almost a necessity, unless you like going to the top of the mountain all the time to reboot things when something goes wrong. If you're using infrastructure that's not super duper robust, and something can happen, or something goes down, it's nice to be able to power cycle things. And I don't know that we've ever talked about it, but there's a number of solutions out there. Internet control of power up and power down is a huge deal for some applications, and for a remote rig kind of thing, it would be important as well. And with that, I'll throw that out as a potential topic. W610.
Well, given that it probably, now that we've covered this topic and further explored and gone down the rabbit hole, that if you want to work D-Star or digital modes in general, of course, open digital modes, that's what we want to talk about, it would be better just to take the device with you and connect it there at your destination. It seems that remote rig for at least digital purposes, that is D-Star, would not necessarily be the best answer, although I can see that, especially for those that have extensive D-Star digital base stations. Why not just operate the whole shebang, your shack, if that's the choice remotely? But you do bring up an important point, and that is that you're likely going to have better luck connecting your access point or hotspot there at the destination. So let me see if there's anything further on the remote control, and then we will take up Bob and his offer to flip the topic a bit to an important topic, which is rebooting remotely, powering down, powering up stations. Please key up.
ZL2U.
ZL2UF, go ahead.
ZL2UDF. Yeah, I agree with the previous person. That's what I've done. I actually took the handheld with me to Australia, and the DV dongle. In fact, I just found it easier to tether my phone to the laptop and use the DV dongle, and that worked fine. So I agree. That's it made it simple, easier to carry as well. I had to take the laptop anyway for business, but that worked for me. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any further follow-up on this? We'll take you now. Please key up.
W8VI.
W8VI, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick comment on remote hams and also Kenwood radios. I've got a 990 and a 480, and with the Kenwood software that you can remotely use, which works out real well. It has the option to turn on and off the rig and completely turn it off and bring it back up. And the same thing with remote hams. They have a configuration that goes into the Kenwood radios and turns them on and off. Not all radios have that feature. I think it's more rig dependent than it is, software dependent. But the Kenwood radios that I have, I'm able to turn those, on and off, and which is nice, and also have some remote capabilities where I can disconnect the antennas through Wi-Fi, which also works out nicely when there's a storm approaching. Back to net from W8VI.
Yeah, so, I mean, Kenwood, does it have its own remote control software that is part of some of the base stations? And I remember at one point there was some issue in using them with remote rig. I take it that's been resolved. Back to you. I'm sorry, W8VI, did you copy? And quite frankly, you can ignore the question because it has nothing to do with D-Star, but I just remember that everybody was pretty excited about Kenwood's proprietary remote control software and setup that was part of the rigs, didn't require an external gear. W8VI, you don't have to comment on it, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Go ahead.
Okay, I apologize. I'm somewhat confused. What was the question again, so I can understand it?
This is stupid. The Kenwood at one point had a proprietary built-in remote control software that I can't remember the name of, but it was Kenwood. And at the time, when they developed it for certain of the base stations, remote rig didn't work, and then there was quite a stink to finally get remote rig to work, and Kenwood finally caved in and said, hey, remote rig was a better way to, remotely control our devices instead of the Kenwood software. I just was wondering if you knew anything about that, and if you don't, that's just fine. We probably wasted way too much time on this. So W8VI, go ahead.
Hey, no, I don't. I apologize that I don't know about that deal or that instance with remote rig and whatever. I do know that Kenwood, the 480 and the 990 have two software programs. One is to turn on and off the rig that connects through the Wi-Fi. That's the AHRP version, they call it. And then they have another standalone program, which is basically a client that, you open it up and you control the rig and operate it, turn the volume up and down, frequencies, all those nice things. So that's a control program, and it is separate. So you need both of those programs to run to be able to turn on and off the Kenwood transceivers. And so that's all I know. Back to net, W8VI.
I appreciate it. Sure. Not too many other people did. All right. Anything further? Any follow up on the remote rigs? Just one last call before we take a sidestep on this topic. Stations, please key up. All right. Nothing seen or heard. So W6KD, since you mentioned this, how would you go about making sure that you can remotely shut down or reboot your device when you're traveling or away from it, and you need to do so, or more importantly, you have it up on a mountaintop? Hey, you may even have a repeater that's an MMDVM repeater, and it goes bonk and just stops. And of course, the first thing most people do is to reboot it, but how do you avoid the trip to the mountaintop? W6KD, go ahead.
Well, I'm speaking from the results of my research. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of hands-on experience, so I'm not. I'm speaking from book knowledge and not hands-on knowledge. So the usual caveats apply. There may be some gaps here, but there's a whole class of devices. They're called remote IP switches or web switches, which connect to your internet router and which allow you to send commands either from a computer or from an Android or iPhone app to turn the outlet or outlets that are connected on these devices on or off on command. And it's pretty handy to have. One of the real drawbacks of automation, remote automation of all kinds, whether that be your Nest thermostat or your remote sprinkler control system or the remote cameras on your alarm system or whatever, one of the drawbacks is that if you have a glitch and you're gone, you're kind of stuck with it, because what you would normally do is power cycle a thing, unplug it and plug it in, and 99% of the time that works, but you got to be there to do that. And in fact, I have one of those Nest thermostats. I installed it, and about 18 months ago, we were headed off to go greet our newly arriving grandson into the world, and we headed off put the pointy end of the BMW East, and got one day down the road in a hotel in Salina, Kansas, and the bloody Nest thermostat stopped talking to the internet, and worse, I didn't know if it had just lost its internet connectivity or if it had just stopped working and my house was going to freeze. This was in the middle of January, and it was cold here in Colorado, and so I had to come up with a plan B and get one of my friends to come over to the house and come in and check on the thing, which was a big hassle. And anyway, it would have been really nice to just be able to power cycle and restart the router and get it back, which is ultimately what it took to make that happen. So it's not just ham radio stuff, but certainly if you're running a remote, if you're running a repeater, for example, especially if it's a repeater, let me change hands here. Anyway, yeah, if you're running a repeater that's built, like the homebrew repeater that's not built, it's not a Motorola, commercial box that you spent $3,800 on, and it's connected into a UPS and with commercial grade power and all that stuff. If you got an experimental box or homebrew repeater or whatever, and as they're prone to do from time to time, it locks up or whatever, the first thing you want to do is try to get it back by power cycling. These web switches will do that, but I don't know which ones are good or which ones are bad, or I know that there's some that automatically ping like Google or a server, and if they lose internet connectivity, you can program them to do things automatically when the internet connection drops. And anyway, there's like part to this thing that might be interesting to talk about. But I'm not the one to lead the discussion because I've read about some of it, and I know there's probably some folks here that have used the stuff, but it goes hand in hand though with remote operation. The ability to power your stuff up and down is just as important as the ability to use it remotely, I think. So with that, I'll send it back. W6KD.
All right, Bob, thanks. So, as you explained, there's a lot of devices, and, I don't know about home thermostat control. I'm not sure what you connect to that, but that was a great example of a problem that you have. So, let's get some help. What have you guys used either at mountaintops or at home, or is there some new technology that we've just overlooked in talking about this topic that solves this all, that you can remotely control by internet the entirety of your home, and even turn honk the horn in your car just to know your neighbors in the middle of the night if you chose to do. Stations, please, Kia. All right, anything seen or heard? Well, let's bring it back down to serious business. You need to reboot your access point or hotspot, wherever it may be. Or you're planning on putting a digital repeater up on a mountaintop. Maybe you're taking out the nasty old DMR repeater and replacing it with a multi-mode MMDVM repeater, and you just don't want to make that trip anymore. What has worked best in your experience to be able to remotely reboot it at the very least, and perhaps go further and have the device let you know that is this device that's going to eventually reboot, but perhaps make reports on the status of what's going on up there? What do you know? Tell us. Please, Kia.
W4GMI.
W4GMI. Welcome, go ahead.
Well, Mike, we use a series of 3 different things. We use TeamViewer, we use VNC, and we use IP switch, such as what he was using. But I try to go in and look to see what's going on before I do a reboot, and the worst thing you can do is do a hard reboot, such as IP. So I try to go in and if I can't get in TeamViewer, if I can't VNC into it, I'll TeamView into it. And I have ways of sending DTMF commands that'll do certain things like a soft reboot. But the last resort is the IP outlet, such as an IP outlet for AC. The worst thing you want to do is try to hard reboot something like that, because then you take that 20-mile hike to the mountain if something goes south from there. W4GMI.
Well, okay, David, appreciate that. So what device is at the mountaintop that allows you to make the view, and is that all it does, and you have to, and then you use the IP switch? Is that hardware? I mean, what's there that you VNC into or TeamViewer into? Which I think, it seems to me that TeamViewer would be an odd way to go. Well, I guess you can connect to a computer by TeamViewer. Anyway, we need to know a bit more. W4GMI, go ahead.
Well, there's that trusty old ragged XP box. It ain't gonna be much worth anything if it gets stolen up there at the site. Somebody breaks in and, oh, computer, let's steal it. So that's one device, and don't even have a monitor on it. Just I can get into it remotely from a laptop. then the VNC is VNCing into the Raspberry Pi, which is actually connected to the D-Star repeater. We run all homebrew stuff, Kenwood TKR 750s and 850s with a DV repeater board version 1 and a Pi. And if they steal the Pi, there ain't much to be lost, so that's why we go with the cheaper equipment up there, and it's really reliable. And the IP, we have a router up there, of course, and but the IP AC switch, I cannot remember the name of it, but it will send me alarms on my phone via Google as to what's going on. We have this thing set up to the thermostat up there at the building too. If something goes haywire with the AC and everything decides to start cooking, it'll let us know what temperature, and it'll let me know when the door alarm opens. We have all that integrated in on the XP box, and also we have a backup IP video camera. I can look at the repeater and look at the sequence of lights and about tell what's going on if we lost some kind of connection or whatever. Back to you, Mike. W4GMI. It's all very easy stuff. It may sound technical, but it's very elementary. W4GMI.
Very cool, elementary stuff. Well, so stations, what about being able to reboot or reset your equipment at home? As Bob suggested or talked about, you're out and about and you want to restart your D-Star device at your house. And it sounds like it shouldn't take much, but how would you remote control, at least at a minimum? And, you know, the D-Star devices, for the most part, especially the Raspberry Pi DVAP, they can handle a reboot, or actually they can handle a power down. It's not a good idea, and it is possible, of course, that your image on your micro SD card or your SD card could get corrupted. But you know, I've had the hard reboot occasionally. The Raspberry Pi that has a 2-meter DVAP, and it's not one of the bad ones. It doesn't just start transmitting on its own, but it is problematic from time to time. It just locks and receives. And it would be cool to be able to remotely restart it, or whatever device I may have at the house that needs to be remotely rebooted because I just can't come back here. What suggestions do you have? Stations, please, Kia.
ZL2U W4GMI.
I have ZL2UDF and W4GMI. ZL2UDF. Go ahead.
Two items. Basically, the first one is I'm interested in the previous person who was talking about using the XP box. Whether he's written an article or has a white paper or something, or can refer us, because that would be certainly interesting for our local repeater site where we have the D-Star repeaters. And the second one, which comes with a caveat because it could be a bit dangerous, but we use it commercially, not in radio type things, but where something fails, you just don't want to go back to work at night time. We use watchdog timers, so if the system stops, the watchdog timer expires and it reboots the system, or does a power off, power on cycle. Like I say, there's a caveat with it, but you're just going to make sure that if you're going to allow that to happen, there's some other things involved. So if it was a fire situation, you don't want it to be lighting more stuff up. Back to you.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that approach where it just checks to make sure everything's up and running, and when it isn't, it on its own reboots it. Got it. So your question was whether W4GMI keyed up independently of this, but we'll see if he can help you with that. If that setup that you have, David, up on the mountaintop, if there is a website or paper or something that you might be able to take a look at to get a better idea as to what you got going up there, if in fact you follow something like that, or if somebody's put something together for the good of the group. And then go ahead with your question of transmission W4GMI. Go ahead.
Okay, Mike, we also have a Echolink and RLP and an All-Star system up there. So I can go into the XP box by DTMF off the air from another radio such as Echolink or whatever and do a master reset there. So we have a redundancy system. And I'm also able to go into the router up there and look at and see what's online and what's off, and just as a troubleshooting tool. That may not mean nothing, but anyway, I think the IP switch, AC switch we're using, is just a simple outlet. It's got a Cat5 cable plugged into it off the router, and it plugs into the wall independently on the AC. I think it's a D-Link, if I'm not sure, but it'll send you over a Google page what's going on with it, what it's done, the history, and you can also set that up to do a hard reboot if it loses connectivity and reboot itself. W4GMI.
Alrighty, appreciate it. Stations, please key up. Well, nobody responded, so anything further on this topic, or either of the two topics, either remotely controlling your D-Star from, and, your rig from a remote location, which, as for the D-Star, we all pack either a laptop and a dongle, or a radio and either a multi-mode device, or a Raspberry Pi dongle, and, DVAP, and it seems to be the easiest way to go, but that's beside the point because it's fun talking about these subjects. Or on the remote control of your device to power up and off, power off or reboot. Anything further before we move on? Let's take you now. Please key up.
01 Hotel November.
I've got Z01HN and N6MUD. First, we say hello to Brian, Z01HN. Go ahead.
Roger there. Good evening, Mike, and hope you're keeping up with the score there on the baseball. Some years ago, I played with this, and what I found was a very easy way to do it is the Tate radios that I use for hotspots and repeaters. Has a programmable I/O. The intention for this originally was that you could remotely operate a horn, or you could remotely turn off the transmitter. In my case, I just had a transistor which was connected to the reset pin on the Raspberry Pi Model 2, the one with the wide SD card. And I could just tap in a CTCS tone, and that would reset the Pi. And you can program it so one tone turns it off and another tone turns it on. Now, I know that the Motorola and the GM300 series of radios has a similar I/O, and the downside to it is not something you can do remotely over the network, but it's something that you can do if you're within range of the repeater receiver. And, of course, it's just done as an FM DTMF tone, because at the repeater site that can receive FM or D-Star. Some systems may be configured differently, and it may not work for everybody, but it worked perfectly for me when I didn't have an internet connection at the site. Over.
All right, well, that's another way to go. And as KE0AYJ points out in the shop box, that most of the new transceivers, for example, the IC7100, which of course is D-Star capable, both on UHF, VHF, as well as HF, they actually don't power off. They don't want you to turn it. They want it kept plugged in. You lose the clock setting and some other stuff. So they just go into standby mode. And when you turn the radio off on the switch, it actually still has power to the radio to, well, primarily the clock and some other features. So I don't know if that makes a difference if connecting that to like an IP switch and turning it on and off is a good idea. Perhaps that might be handled differently. That's hard to say. But, you know, we'll think about that another time. Brian, thanks for being with us. N6MUD, Craig, your turn. Go ahead.
Hey, good evening, Mike and Annette. Hey, Brian, congratulations. The Kiwis won the American Cup again, so I wanted to congratulate you on that. Following it pretty closely over here. Nice seeing the motherland finally take one home there, so congratulations. I've done a lot of remote stuff over the years, being part of a technology company that had data center, we servers and what have you. But more recently, I wanted to point out that obviously if your router goes down for a while, if you've got a lot of automation that's relying on getting emails out, you're not going to know about it. So a lot of these companies like Nest, for instance, they have various technologies that try to ping back into the devices from the cloud. So if your router goes down, you've got an outside service like Nest on servers that are actually trying to make contact to your thermostat, to your camera, to your smoke detector, and you'll actually get alerts on your phone that, hey, Craig, we've lost connectivity with your house. What's going on? And so that's kind of how they do that, and that's actually a more reliable way to do it. That's how most commercial entities go about actually detecting and alerting. Is you try to actually, it's called a heartbeat. You try to actually create a heartbeat that will ping in to whatever you want to try and monitor. And that way, if it does go down, you're not restricted and what have you. So I know Nest and a few other ones doing that. I'm sure people that have shacks, whatever, have a lot of automation in their shacks. I've probably thought about this, but it's definitely worth putting some type of a batch file or something that tries to ping back into your shack from outside in the cloud, maybe on Amazon server or whatever. And that way, it can actually send you alerts like how it's down, versus you getting a bunch of alerts once it comes back up because it's too late at that point. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents there, Mike. Great net. Back to net control.
Greg, that's interesting. So I haven't investigated Nest, although I've read about it and seen it, and it's in a locked cage over at Home Depot because apparently it's a hot ticket shoplift item. But did they make a interface that you can plug non-Nest or older equipment into that the Nest cloud service could use to keep track of that device, whether it's up and running or not, and then report back to you when there are difficulties? Do you know? N6MUD, go ahead.
You know what, Mike, I don't think Nest makes those, but there's a couple of other Nest-like companies that do that. I don't remember the names. But if Nest was smart to do that, but all of the Nest stuff, I mean, it's extremely expensive, but it's best of breed, best of quality. It's plug and play. It's definitely overpriced, but it does what it does really well, so that's all I have to say about Nest. In the beginning, I was a Nest hater because I knew that Nest came along and they stole a bunch of good ideas. Obviously, I think Nest is owned by Google, but they stole a bunch of ideas from smaller companies. But what they did is they improved on it and made it a lot better. So, personally, I like a lot of the Nest stuff. I have as much Nest stuff as I can justify here, including a camera, outdoor camera that streams 24/7 24/7 to the internet, and that stream can be analyzed by the cloud, and all types of special flags and detections and alerts go off based on various workflow and what have you. So, I mean, honestly, Mike, if Nest does not have such a device, they definitely need to have one because they have all the infrastructure to support it. And they most likely do. I'm just not aware of it there. Over.
Okay, well, the high cost of Nest explains its high shoplift probability and why they keep that stuff locked up behind cabinets, because it is relatively small packaging. All right, Craig, thanks. Oh, before you get away, so how did Field Day go? Did you take your D-Star device and give it a try? And I know that you were off into the boonies, and we're going to try to do something with D-Star. What did you do? Did it work out, or did you just lob it over the edge and just to see what it would sound like hitting the pavement, several thousand feet below? In 6 MUD, go ahead.
Yeah, I went down to PS Island. I didn't go to the boonies. I drove about 5 miles down the street to PS Island. And I did a lot of HF stuff. It was too windy to put up a mast with a decent antenna. But I used my screwdriver, my Target screwdriver antenna, and conditions weren't that great in HF. I still managed to talk 20-something states on 4 or 5 bands, including Alaska and Hawaii. So it wasn't too bad, but definitely dismal conditions HF-wise. I tried to use D-Star, but honestly, Mike, I've had zero luck in Field Day on D-Star on Simplex. So whatever. I'm just I'm a rookie when it comes to doing D-Star for Field Day, but I did give it a try, and I didn't get anything there of it.
Well, good for you on the other contacts and participating in Field Day. We appreciate the report. All right, anything further before we move on? Let's take you. Please key up.
W6KD.
W6KD, go ahead.
Yeah, well, kind of going back to Craig, what he was talking about. Yeah, I mean, the Nest thermostat, in fact, on the example I gave, sent me, your Nest thermostat talks via Wi-Fi through your home LAN to a server that they on their system, and in fact, their server figured out that the Nest device wasn't talking anymore, and it in fact did alert me that that had happened. And of course that begged the question, is do I have a functioning heating system at all in my house? Which ultimately turned out it did. It had reverted to its basic programming, and it was just it was still working. It just wasn't it wasn't allowing me to go in and look at the temperature and change the schedule and all that stuff. But the reason for a remote power switch capability is that I was unable to fix the basic problem, which was that the router had gone wonky, and so my a whole bunch of internet connected stuff stopped working, and so it would have been really, really handy to have a remote way of power cycling my cable modem and router, with a cellular device, with a telephone line. I mean, there's, the remote capability is only as good as it's only good as long as it's powered up and connected to the internet. If something goes wrong with that, all the things that you would do if you were there, you can't do remotely. So that was the whole genesis of the discussion, is that sometimes it's a must-have, and it's certainly handy to have the ability to power down and power up devices up to and including your router, which, of course, you wouldn't be able to do that exactly on the internet. From my reading, it appears that there are devices that they'll allow you to program them to, to ping and, ping Google server or you ping, device, something else out there. And if it stops answering up, then it kind of goes into a fail-safe mode and restarts things, but, that's, anyway, it's sort of an essential backup if you're going to do anything, in a significant way in the remote arena. And with that, I'll leave it, 56 Kitty.
Well, Bob, appreciate that. And, we did divert from that core example because you made that example and I ignored it. But the cable modem and router, which if they go wonky, would have to be controlled by something other than a typical internet connection. So how would one go about doing that? Has anyone, in fact, invested in such a device or technology to, while they're away, remove, to power cycle the cable modem and router to allow the devices that are connected thusly to that device, by internet within the house or Wi-Fi, to resume their internet connection and reporting? Stations, please key up. In 6MED, go ahead.
Yeah, Mike, like Bob was saying, at our data centers, we have these real complicated, expensive smart switches, power strips, and they did exactly what Bob said, where if they lose connectivity, if they try to ping out to an outbound server like Google, Yahoo, or whatever, and they lose that connectivity, they'll run a script, and that script will be first turn off this power port. Wait a couple minutes and turn off this power port. And that's obviously the more advanced one. So I'm looking here on Amazon, and you can get stuff that's a lot cheaper than that. You can get one from 3G Store, remote power IP switch. It's just one outlet for $70. It's got a LAN connector to it, and it'll do that. It'll basically, it will power cycle automatically if it detects a lapse of internet connectivity by pinging out to some server. So definitely that's the way to do it. In fact, this kind of brings the point up. I might actually buy one of these for my router and cable modem, plug it into it. For that core reason is that now my entire house has got all these smart devices, including a remote operation of my garage door opener, and a remote front door lock. That just makes sense to be able to, power down and automatically reboot the router when it loses connectivity. I appreciate you guys bringing this up because now I'm about to add this to my shopping cart here on Amazon. I'll let you guys know how it works there a little bit, maybe next minute. Back to you, Mike, in 6MED.
Oh, it would be great if you did that. So how much are we talking about while you're shopping Amazon? Go ahead.
Yeah, this one here, one I just pulled up here, 3G Store, remote IP switch, one outlet, $70. They have a two outlet for $99, and I'll get the two outlet one. So I just got to make sure that it has the right amperage now. It's the right amount of watts, which should be good to go. But I'm going to try and get one of these, and it looks like it'll do whatever you want to do. It'll do the automatic power cycle and what have you. So looks like it's the real deal. I'm sure you can get them cheaper too. So, but this looks like a decent one. It's got almost 5 stars, 81 reviews. So we'll check it out. But definitely, it's something I think is this day and age with smart houses and the fact that you've got garage doors now and things that are kind of important hooked up to the router. It just makes sense to be able to control it remotely.
Now, does that device require, as you've described, an outbound server to ping it, or is it self-contained where it has, little mini computer board or otherwise that supplants the external server and does its own pinging of the internet connection. Can you tell? N6MUD, go ahead.
Oh, it's all built in. It's just you could probably tell it where to ping, but if you just ping 8.8.8.8 or whatever, whatever public, even Google's DNS server or whatever, just ping something public like that, it'll do the final. Let me look into this a little bit more and I'll get back to you. But yeah, there's no external server. All these devices, everything's built into it. All you do is plug it in, give it power, give it internet, and it just does everything else. It works as magic.
Oh, okay, I understand that. Yeah, and you certainly don't have to make a report on something you haven't bought yet. And next week, we'd appreciate hearing from you about that. But yeah, there's a lot of free IP pinging services, including such as those that you use to test the internet speed on your phone or your home internet. And they're just a matter of, and probably the device itself may be already pre-configured for that service, that all it does is just ping and there's no cost, or you don't have to subscribe. It's just got it. All right. Appreciate it, Craig. Thanks for joining us. Anyone else with anything else on this subject? Please key up. Alrighty, nothing seen or heard, and great discussion. Alright, before it gets to be too late, although we've been running, about 2.5 hours, so let's open it up for questions and answers. This is typically the time that we will take questions from those that are having problems or would like to get a solution to an issue that faces them with their D-Star or other open digital system, maybe with a multi-mode device, or it can be a topic that you'd like to have addressed during the course of the roundtable, if not tonight, in one of the subsequent roundtables. We call it the open section of this net. That's where we're at. Let's take you now. Stations, please key up. Well, wait a minute. Well, nobody's home. So, again, this is the open segment of the Thursday Night D-Star Roundtable. It's, usually we wait until about 3 hours in, but we're doing it a bit early, which is probably preferred. So, those stations with difficulties, those stations who want to stave off difficulties before they become a difficulty, questions that you may have posed on other nets that did not get answered, and, sometimes you get referred to this one, and then you can take your answer back to the other one, which is not a big deal. But, we take questions and answers so that we can all learn. We've got a number of stations that are equipped mentally to answer, and by experience, to answer questions concerning D-Star and multi-mode digital. You should not just let those knowledgeable old salts just wither away tonight without being able to help you out. So this is my way of begging for, no, I don't beg, but just so we're all clear. And I know the Dodgers are winning, the Angels are losing. I'm depressed. I'm not even going to look at the TV screen anymore. So just make me feel better about things. Stations, please key up. Well, that didn't work out, so that just means that we don't have anything for the open topic or open question segment of the roundtable. No big to do. Let's try this instead. Just for the good of the order, what would you like to talk about? And we'll call it, what should be next here on the roundtable? What did we not talk about? Or do you have a question about something you heard earlier that has got you puzzled, but you didn't want to interrupt the stream of the discussion? Or if, after listening to something you heard tonight, you decided to look it up on Google and found that we're all full of it and there's a better approach to it, at least as far as the Google search is concerned. So, what's on your mind? Let's find out. Stations, please key up.
KC2FQ.
KC2FQ, thanks for joining us. Go ahead.
Oh, it worked. I keyed up before, too, because I didn't hold it in long enough. Yeah, I'm a new D-Star user, and well, sitting on the fence, thinking maybe I'm just going to give it up. Hasn't done much for me just yet. Some friends I expected to be able to talk to like this from all around the country can't get their systems running. The repeaters in their area are down, or internet connection's gone, or so it's getting a little frustrating. I'm trying to link reflectors to listen, talk, and only the sysops seem to have control of that around here, or I'm doing it very wrong. But it's been a bit of a frustrating experience for me so far.
Well, that's no good. Well, certainly you're connected to us, or at least you're talking through a repeater that's linked to this constellation of X reflectors, so something went right. Well, what equipment do you have, and what reflectors were you trying to connect to, or what control were you seeking that only administrators would do? Because that would be unusual. I mean, there are functions of primarily D-Star repeaters that can be powered off to prevent you from connecting to repeaters. That's an administrative lockout. But when it comes to a hotspot at your house connecting to a reflector, unless there's a configuration issue or other issue that is usually easily solved, you should be able to connect to most every reflector as long as you're using the appropriate software. But anyway, what's your setup, and let's see if we can help you out. KC2FQ. Oh, by the way, I need your name and location. I don't see that in your text field. I'd like to put you in the log since you appear to be new to us, but you're sounding good. KC2FQ, go ahead.
Your name is Glenn, and I'm in Mooresville, North Carolina, or you can just call it north of Charlotte if you like, for simplicity. And I made this statement a few weeks ago and was invited to a local group, but couldn't make it down there on the day they met. I think they meet on the third Thursday of the month at a diner, and it wasn't very close, so logistics kept me from going down there. And they did offer to help. Everybody's offered to help me figure it out if I am doing something wrong, or explain the etiquette to me. I can reach about the last week. When I first got the 5100 here, I was able to reach about half a dozen, maybe 5 D-Star repeaters, and now it's down to this one and one other. I don't know if they're off the air or they locked me out because I keep trying to link to France or Arizona or Ohio, but yes, so far no good.
So, are you using your 5100 to on a repeater, trying to operate the gateway to link to reflectors, or do you have a separate access point hotspot like a Raspberry Pi DVAP to talk to with your radio? I'm not clear on your setup, so we can help. Go ahead.
All I have is the 5100. I don't have the DVAP or the Raspberry Pi or an access point or terminal or any of that. It's just a 5100, which doesn't have any of those features anyway. And I can reach all the repeaters I'm attempting to use. I can reach directly when they're up.
Okay, so the problem you're experiencing is as you issue that you're trying to issue commands to link that repeater's gateway to reflectors. Do I have that right? Go ahead.
Yes, the one etiquette I did read somewhere was that they don't like you linking repeaters together. Reflectors are okay. So, yeah, I tried a dozen or more times, and it seems to accept the commands, or then I'm not sure. And but there's never anyone there, or I've never been able to make a contact on a linked reflector on my own. The sysops will come along and link a reflector for a net, and boom, there's everybody talking across the country like they're in the same room. But I just can't seem to accomplish that.
All right. Well, you don't link repeaters in D-Star. You link the repeater and its gateway, which is the connections of, the repeater is a two-way device, and then you connect to the internet now to your reflectors, which is a way of stations, repeaters, and stations with hotspots to link to what would best be described as a conference board. And so, if you're operating someone's repeater, assuming that it's open, the issue would be, I presume, and we'll have stations to help out. Are you issuing the correct commands to link, and then are you trying to do something wildly odd that nobody wants to do? So it sounds like the owner or the admin of the repeater and the gateway can connect to reflectors, but you're having difficulty getting the commands out. So it could be that it's a command issue. Plus, not all D-Star repeaters and gateways can connect to all reflectors. So, have you give an example of a reflector that you try to connect to, and also tell us what you hear when you try to issue the link commands and you're not successful. What do you hear on your radio, or what does it say on the screen when you think that you're not connected? Or is it just that nobody's home? KC2FQ, go ahead.
Could be any of those things. I've seen the UR question mark. I've seen the question mark RPT. I've heard the voice say linked. I've tried using. I mostly use the software method in the radio, in the digital mode of the ICOM 5100. A couple times I've done a manual reflector, and I've just put in, dialed up 003, 038, or a couple in the 70s. I was trying to connect 074, I think. I'm trying to talk to some friends in Ohio. It's tried many times, but like I said, not successful. I probably should just go meet up with those guys in their Thursday diner thing and learn a little bit more about it there. But I was not going to just give it up completely. I was thinking this radio is not. If the situation is that it just so happens all these repeaters I can reach don't allow that, or not set up for that, or can't do it for whatever reason, maybe I'll just go the other route, just go through the computer, get a 51A HT or a 4100 and just use it as a terminal, or get the DVAP set up or whatever, and just talk through my computer and then come out the reflector I want to come out. So it could be operator error. It most likely is operator error. I don't know.
W6.
All right. Well, your issue is kind of broad, and this is a technically advanced net. But let's see if maybe we can have someone give you some help and get you in the right direction. And there's one right now, W6KD. Bob, thanks for keying up. Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of things to throw in. First of all, dstar101.com is probably a good place to go, an internet resource. The Nifty Easy Guide to D-Star is a book sold at HRO and elsewhere. But in general, though, you if you set yourself up a hotspot, cost is about $200 all told. I've got a tutorial on my website, or on my support forum for D-Star Commander, but there's a tutorial on how to build a Raspberry Pi based hotspot. It costs you about $200 for the stuff, and what that does for you is it gives you a simplex micro repeater of your own that you can connect at will anywhere in the world that you want, and without any muss or fuss with getting in anybody else's way on a repeater, etc. And as long as you have if you've got a home internet connection that's capable of streaming YouTube, you have more than enough connectivity to do it at home. And your radio would talk through that device. You could get an HT to roam the house or the neighborhood with that device, and essentially you have your own repeater that way. It's a simplex micro repeater that allows you to go anywhere at will without having to ask anybody. And anyway, there's how-tos and stuff. My website is w6kd.boards. That's like 2x4s, boards, plural.net. And there's a tutorial section that talks about reflectors. There's another tutorial that talks about how to set up a hotspot of your own. That's kind of where I would recommend you go, is set up your own infrastructure. And then there's a lot of resources there, and a lot of, here on this net and elsewhere, people can help you make that work. It's a little bit harder if you're trying to make a repeater somewhere work. You really got to work with the people who run that system and kind of play by their rules. So that's where I'd recommend. But yeah, it sounds like a little more diving into the basics. dstar101.com is a great place. There's some books out there. A little Google flu will go a long way, and that's my 2 cents. W6KD.
What's your website again? Something about board, W6KD, what?
Yeah, it's a support forum for my for the software image that I put out for for Raspberry Pi based hotspot, but it's got a bunch of general information for general purpose information. In particular, the tutorial section. It's at w6kd.boards.net, and that feel free to peruse the site there. There's a reasonably good collection of general information, and then a lot more specific information on the Raspberry Pi image there. I published one of a number of suitable images for setting up the hotspot that I'm talking about there. So anyway, but feel free to come back to this net or for that matter to this constellation during the week. There are a number of us that hang out here and be more than willing to help you get it set up. So W6KD back to that.
All right, Bob, appreciate that. So, KC2FQ, how did you get to us? Was the repeater that you're on linked to this net automatically, that is, you found us here on a repeater, or did you successfully issue a command to link that repeater's gateway to one of the reflectors that are part of this constellation that we have? We have a bunch of them that are linked together. KC2FQ, go ahead.
Oh, I wouldn't have this complaint if I did it myself. I'm proud of myself. No, I just set it to scan the 5 or 6 repeaters that I should be able to reach from my base here, and it stopped on this one, and I listened for a bit and heard what the net was about, and I keyed up the first time, and it didn't work, and then I hit the use reflector thing again, and I got that to the CQ, or I guess it wasn't before. When I first stopped on you, it showed Broomfield, Colorado, and I used to live in Colorado, so that's what got me to listen as well. And that's when I keyed up, and nothing happened. And when I reset the use reflector back to local, or to use whatever the repeater was using, I guess you'd call it, that worked. Now the thing I was wondering about it, I know what the Raspberry Pi does, but is there a way to get on D-Star without a radio at all, period, just without a radio? I know some radios have access points, and you don't need a second radio, like the 4100 and the 51A+2, but if you don't have one of those radios, or will any of these devices allow you to just put a microphone into your computer and talk and come out of a reflector somewhere?
Yeah, that's a good question. Who'd like to answer it? Stations, please key up.
VK2D.
VK2DY. Go ahead.
VK2DY, can you hear me? I'm using a new microphone.
Yeah, it's a bit loud. If you had a control that you could turn the audio down a bit or back off it, which is excellent sound. You just, well, you're loud. VK2DY, go ahead. Well, you didn't have to adjust it this very moment. You could have just backed off it. You had a great audio, just was, you're just driving the mic a bit hard while we wait for the station to adjust things. Another great guide, especially if you're new to D-Star, or even if you're not, because it goes from basic to, I would say, not advanced, but certainly intermediate level of operation of D-Star, is the nifty EZ, it's E-Z Guide to D-Star Operation. The author is N6FN. It's in its third edition. It may be in the fourth by now, but it's inexpensive. It's available at all the ham stores. I'm sure it's available on Amazon, but it's my Bible, and I learned a lot about D-Star, and I continue to use it for reference every now and then. You can't remember everything. Anyway, so VK2DY, are you back with us? Well, I think we lost him, and I'm sorry about that. Perhaps I should have said nothing. It just, to me, he was just overdriving the audio just a bit. Anyway, so back to the KC2FQ question. Sure, you can get what is known as a dongle, and there's or a thumb DV. There's various devices that can connect to your computer's USB port. And by the way, it's just as a side note, the IC4100 is probably not a good choice, and it's because although it claims to be an access point or a terminal mode, they're all cabled. And it's not really designed, believe it or not, those two features for the U.S. market. It's mainly for Japan and a few other, well, just Japan. There are far better choices radio-wise, but if you have a radio, you can use that to talk to any DVAC or dongle, although if you have a base, it's not the same as walking around the house. But if you have a computer and it has a mic, or you can attach a mic to it, a dongle or a thumb DV or similar USB plug-in device for D-Star will allow you to do just what you said. And that's what I'm talking on right now. As I'm talking on, although there's some audio processing and I'm using a mixer board and a bunch of other stuff. But essentially, it's from a PC to a dongle, which is connected directly to the internet. No radios needed. So I'm going to give it back to KC2FQ for any final before we move on, and we probably will, and let you read more and get into it as the W6KD suggested, and then we'll find out what else is happening before we bring the net to a close. So KC2FQ, back to you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mike. And thanks to Bob, too. I forgot to say thanks earlier for your help there. And that might be the way to go. I bought this radio. I was curious. I bought it to act as a base station. And I'm not that fond of the radio. I bought it because of the D-Star function. And then, lo and behold, the problems I already discussed. And I started to really get annoyed for buying it. But yeah, I might, I think I want to go back to a straight analog radio to act as a base station. And then when I get my shack set up correctly, I'll have a computer next to me. That might be the way to go for me then. 'Cause I won't be tied into the local machines that I'm having the difficulties with. And some of that might be me, but I think some of that also is they're probably just set up for the sysops only. One of them is Permalink, the Reflector 38A. So that's the only etiquette that I've learned so far about the few that I can hit. So anyway, I'm, like you said, sounds like you want to move on. So I'm well on this all night. I don't have all night. I'm on the East Coast here, so it's midnight, way after. So, but appreciate the help. There's always been a lot of people willing to help, which is nice. So back to the net. Thanks to all who did jump in.
W4G.
D-Star is a lot of fun. Don't give up on it. There's a learning curve, but we all went through it. With the dongle, of course, you lose portability. I'm stuck here. I can't just pick this thing up and run with it attached to a PC, but it does what it does. Good luck to you, and we hope to see you back on the net again. W4GMI, go ahead.
Let me plug in one thing to him, if I could. K6KD's website is a good website. Also, you can go to Google and type in WB4QDX, not Google, I'm sorry, YouTube. Type in W4QDX. He has a very good tool tree that he does at the Dayton Hamvention every year. It starts all the way from the basics, and it'll talk about the exact radio you're on and everything, and step by step what you need to do and how it's done with your radio. It may be good to see how it's done on YouTube, and that may be a good tool tree, but that's WB4QDX, or you can type in Dayton D-Star Hamvention, and I think it's 2016, 2015, 14, 13, or whatever, but anyway, that's a good tool tree. W4GMI, back to you, Mike.
David, thanks for that. Appreciate it. Let's see if we can get Robert back, VK2DY, and testing a new mic. I'm sorry that he disappeared, but maybe he hasn't. VK2DY, go ahead. Well, there may be problems more than just a new mic. Well, as always, if you're listening but can't seem to get in, or I recognize you and it sounds like I can't hear you, certainly if you fix it, just key back up. Please just don't double or quick key. We pause regularly to let stations do just that. So I think where we last left off was to find out what else is on your mind. It seems that we may be nearing the end of the roundtable. Of course, if there are stations that wish to participate, that is, key up and talk about D-Star or open source digital systems, we always entertain that, although we just don't stay open for days on end as we used to, so it seems at times. But let's see where we're at. Who did we miss? If you keyed up and I didn't recognize you, and I have to tell you, I seldom miss anybody. If you just flinch on your D-Star gear, it shows your call sign. I see you key up here on the history screen. But sometimes it happens, and we don't ignore anybody. We don't not call on them. That's not good English, but on purpose. So we'll throw those people in with the next round. What did we not talk about that you'd like to talk about, or what else did we fail to discuss, or is there something further for the roundtable that deserves our attention? Please key up now.
One more quick thing from me here.
KC2FQ.
Go ahead, KC2FQ.
Yeah, sorry about that. Didn't mean to drag you back this way again, but I just wanted to mention, I forgot to mention it before, I never heard even once the 2 station with the mic issue. I guess nobody heard him on the last one, my understanding. But you had 2 or 3 QSO or Volley between you two. I didn't hear a word, not one sound, nothing on my end. That struck me as really weird.
Well, that's a reason why if I call a station and they do not respond, or if I just open it up generally by saying, stations, please key up, if no one keys up, I announce that. It's not just because I like to hear myself talk. It's also to let everybody else know that their radios are not bad. That is, all right, N6HK, K7REX, we doubled. Do you have anything for the round table? So key up.
VK2B.
All right, K7REX, that was completely unintelligible. It was garbage, and unfortunately, I couldn't understand a thing he said. I'm not even sure quite how to describe it or to tell you what it was that just happened. But, Dan, it just didn't make it through. And anyway, I had to unkey because I was doubling, and the key up, the double interrupted my audio connection to the other reflectors from 002, so that accounted for the pause. Anyway, getting back to KC2FQ, that is why I announced nothing seen or heard, so that you don't think that you're the only one not hearing something. It's me to let everybody else know that, hey, nobody's keyed up, so everybody can keep track and not have, well, I just explained it. But thanks for asking. All right, so K7REX, completely unintelligible. I had VK2DY that keyed up immediately afterwards. So, and they're both on DV4 minis, which, wow. I don't know what's going on with them, and I appreciate the VE5XES. Okay, KE6IZU, recognize standby. VK2DY, you're doubling with me, and I take it that you can't hear us or the audio's down. So, but let me call on you now. VK2DY, N6HKH, how copy? Go ahead. All right, VK2DY, got about a 30-second key up, 0 audio. All I heard was carrier, but no audio. So you got a problem you need to resolve. Key back up when you get it resolved. K7REX